Yeah, really. Don't stick your tongue upon him. It's gonna get stuck.
For multiple reasons, I would say, actually. Maybe not lick a dead body. I don't know. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unbelievable, the podcast where I tell my friend Luis two unbelievable historical stories, one true, one fake.
And it's up to me to decide which is which.
Luis, before I jump into the two stories I'm going to be telling you today, do you have a little fast fact for me, maybe true, maybe false, to warm us up?
Damn, Kurt, I thought you were gonna ask me how my day was going, but I see you have other priorities in mind.
No, all business on this podcast. We have stuff to attend to.
No time to lollygag.
Yeah, because as I've been telling you throughout the week, Luis, I have put everything into this episode. I'm going to pour my heart out on this microphone and hope that I can finally trick you.
You have to, Kurt, because you have to keep up. Well, in that case, I guess I'll go ahead and give the fact and then hand the mic over to you. But
yeah, get it done and get out of the way.
Yeah,
okay?
I gotta get out of the way. Well, Kurt, the fact I have for you today is, well, it's more of a question. True or false, Kurt? Is Madrid in the same time zone as Berlin?
Ooh, I should know this because I've
For
been both of those
context, I'll give
places.
you a little bit of context, Kurt. The distance between Madrid and Berlin is about 2,300 kilometers.
Yeah, like that means anything to me.
Okay, sorry. Actually, it's never mind. It's 2,300. It's like over 1,000 miles.
Look, I'm American, Luis. You're gonna have to measure it in hamburgers or guns or something. I don't know.
or local restaurants.
Yeah. Oh, you could appeal to my rural side. How many horses is it?
Oh God, I don't know. How many hands?
How many hands? Yeah. No, but I think I'm gonna say that I think they're in different time zones.
Well, the answer there, Kurt, is false. They are in the same time zone. But
You snake.
I tricked you a little bit. It should be that they're in different time zones because the distance between Madrid and Berlin is about twice the distance as it is from Chicago to New York.
Oh, that's interesting.
But here's the thing. In World War II, or actually during the Spanish Civil War, in solidarity of the German Reich, Francisco Franco, the dictator of Spain at the time, said, you know what? In solidarity, we're going to change our time zone to the same time zone as Berlin so that we're always connected. And ever since, they've just forgotten to change it.
Wow, that's an interesting little fangirl move by Franco there.
Yeah. And to this day, if you're in Spain, it's going to be the same time as if you were in Berlin, over 2,000 kilometers away.
Huh. Interesting. I
And
did
that's
not
it,
know
Kurt. Which, please do not comment any further because it's time for you to get onto you.
that. It is. Okay.
I'm excited.
Let's get right into it.
You've been hyping
So-
this up for the whole week, Kurt.
Yes, I really have. I'm nervy, Luis. I'm sweating already.
Me too.
Okay, this first story, I have to give some background information, but I don't want to bury the lead. So let me tell you that I'm going to tell you the story of a real life James Bond villain.
Ooh, I like
Okay.
it already.
Out of curiosity, where do you think a real life James Bond villain would be born? What place? What country?
Eastern Europe somewhere, like Czech Republic.
Ooh, that's a good guess. I feel like same sentiment maybe. Born in
Okay.
Rhodesia, 1972.
That makes sense.
Our protagonist's name here is Paul LaRue.
Good name.
He's
Just to get started.
actually adopted by pretty well-off parents, but he doesn't find out he's adopted until later in his life. As a youth, he's described as a tall, trim, handsome boy, not very social or interested in sports. A lot of his friends later remark how innocent he seemed, that a lot of his friends were getting into trouble, doing whatever, but not Paul so much. In 1980, his family moves to South Africa following the end of the Rhodesian Bush War. By the way, there's a lot of references to the creation of Zimbabwe and Rhodesian Bush War, and it's way too complicated for me to try to put all on the table. But just so you know, Rhodesia was a basically white nationalist state in conflict with who ended up becoming the Prime Minister Mugabe. And eventually the conflict ended in 1980 when they moved and Mugabe took power.
Mugabe would be the Prime Minister of where?
The Prime Minister of Zimbabwe.
Of Zimbabwe. Okay.
Yeah. So what was Rhodesia became Zimbabwe.
Right. Okay.
At age 10, Paul is given a computer in exchange for washing his dad's car. He's immediately in love with the computer. He spends almost all his time playing video games, joining chat rooms. He doesn't like school very much. He refuses to learn Afrikaans, which is mandatory to learn in South African schools. Paul says it's a useless dead language.
Wow.
Ultimately, he drops out of school at 16 and enrolls in a community programming course and discovers he has kind of an affinity for programming. The course is meant to be a year long, but he finishes it in just 2 months.
Wow.
During the 90s, he works as a programmer in the UK and gets married and moves to Australia with his wife. In 1998, he releases this pretty groundbreaking project called E for M, which stands for Encryption for the Masses. So previously, the way that encryption software worked is it would encrypt a specific part of a disk, whatever the file is where you want to hide your stuff. So if someone was looking in your computer, they wouldn't be able to get into that file, but they know that's where all the sensitive information is, so they can put all their resources towards that. What Paul created is something that encrypts the entire disk. So not only do they not know what's hidden, they don't know where it's hidden either.
So it's not like having like a safe. It's more like locking your house down, essentially?
Yeah, that's a good analogy. LaRue was a really strong believer that people needed to protect themselves from government surveillance and data gathering, which is interesting because his prediction kind of came true that it was going to be a big problem in the future. So he wanted everyone to be able to have his encryption software for free, so he released it free of charge with open source code. Open source code means that the code is publicly accessible, can be modified and distributed. It's meant for other people to be able to work on it and improve it, so everyone can kind of work as a community to work on a project.
Okay. This man sounds great so far. Man of the people. I like it.
Well, yeah, he's got his like little Joker origin story moment coming up. So just sit tight.
Oh no.
So what happens is, because he has this revolutionary idea and it's freely available, people steal it because they actually use some of the same code that he used and develop their own product to monetize. After E4M has been publicly available for about 2 years, Paul doesn't have any money because he's just been working on this free project. He actually ends up having to get hired for one of the companies that stole his idea, working on their version of his idea.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And then a few months, I know. And then a few months into that employment, they fire him because they discover he's still working on E4M instead of their version, which is TrueCrypt.
Okay.
So at this point, he's 27. He has no money. He feels cheated. He's a lot of old forum posts he made have been found where he's kind of complaining about how he thinks everyone profited off his idea, and he came in with good intentions and people abused him. He also at this time discovers that he was adopted.
Oh no.
And on his birth certificate, whoever his birth mother was just wrote his first name as unknown, which a lot of people say really seemed to bother him. He already had a lot of insecurities about being a nobody or being kind of passed over by life. No. And now he feels like maybe he was marked to be no one from the beginning.
You know, that's like, it's more like a choose your own adventure at that point, Kurt. You know, I think there's a way to flip this, right? Yeah, it's unknown, but that means I can make my name like Megatron or something. Well, that's how I'd see it.
Yeah. Paul LaRue was added later. So 2 months after he was born on his birth certificate, it says they amended his name to be Paul. But originally he was born under the name Unknown. But your idea about just making up whatever name you want, yeah, Paul's going to use that later as well. So.
Ooh, exciting.
Yeah. Okay, so he's 27, no money. He's upset, feels rejected by life. He divorces his wife. He relocates to Hong Kong and then Rotterdam in the Netherlands. He remarries and he starts working on some new projects. Eventually, in 2004, he releases a website service called RX Limited.
Okay.
So basically, Paul looked at the American medical system, especially with pharmacies and prescriptions, and thought this is very complicated. And I bet that if I gave people an easier way to do it that was in a legal gray area, they would still take that opportunity.
Nice. That's the American way right there.
That's the American way. So the way this worked is customers would fill out questionnaires about their medical history and symptoms. Then they would order their chosen medication and pay with credit card. The questionnaires would then get forwarded to a doctor in the U.S. who would then write a prescription for the drugs ordered. Even though they've never examined the patient, the prescription would then be sent with the customer's order to a pharmacy in the U.S. who would then ship the drug to the customer. Both the doctor and the pharmacy would receive a commission for the order.
Okay.
RX Limited would acquire new pharmacies and doctors through spam emails advertising their service, and the emails were designed to make the business look as genuine as possible. They actually started to have to generate new websites to keep spam emails from being blocked, because a lot of emails, if they see multiple promotional emails coming from one source, they'll mark it as spam. So Paul LaRue created his own domain seller called AB Systems to allow RX Limited to generate unlimited domains for free. So he basically made his own GoDaddy so he could have unlimited websites for free.
Very nice.
At the height of RX Limited, it's estimated that more than half the rogue online pharmacy domain names were registered through AB Systems. So of all the people out there trying to do this racket of selling drugs online, Paul had half of the websites.
Good.
He also opened call centers. They would handle customer service questions, but also cold call potential future customers. Anyone who asked about the legitimacy of the business was told that everything was completely legitimate, but if they wanted to double check, they could call this number to speak to a retired DEA agent who worked with RX Limited. The person was not a retired DEA agent. There was a person at the end of the number, but it was just someone pretending to be a DEA agent.
If you or anyone you know is curious about the legitimacy of this business, feel free to call this number, where we will promptly tell you to go screw yourself.
Feel free to call this other person who will also lie to you.
Don't worry, our system is designed, integrated so that you get an answer no matter what. There's no confirmation that it will be the true answer, but you will get an answer, damn it.
That's true. We can answer any questions, just not truthfully.
Exactly. It's kind of like this podcast.
That's true. So first he sets up call centers in Israel, but later he moves the operation to the Philippines. The reason why he moves to the Philippines is because he quickly learns over time that if he gives money to the right people, he greases the right palms, he can get away with basically anything. Later it actually becomes important because the Philippines is pretty hesitant to extradite him or really press him at all for any legality. RX Limited only dealt in 5 drugs, and none of them were controlled substances, but they all had the potential to be addictive.
Oh, God.
So he's operating in, again, this kind of legal gray area. He's not really being pressed by the Philippine government, and the size of his operation is pretty well flying under the radar because of doctor-patient confidentiality, and I think there's a similar confidentiality for pharmacies. So no one can just, by asking around, find out what's going on. So he's making tons of money, kind of semi-illegally selling drugs, going completely unnoticed. RX Limited is extremely successful. It's hard to know actually how much because most of the money made was ultimately laundered, but the IRS calculated that RX Limited owed $1.5 million in taxes just for the year of 2005. Of course,
very nice.
None of which they paid.
Of course not. Why would they?
Paul's pretty successful with RX Limited at this point. He's got a lot of money to do something with. And he's kind of working in a semi-legal arena. What do you think you would do at this point, Luis?
If I were me, I would take that money and just enjoy it for as long as I could. However, if we were to tap into the darker side of my business self, which doesn't exist, but if it did, I see this as an opportunity. I see this as a bit of a trampoline, an economic trampoline, where they're not catching me. Why would they catch me? We're going to keep going. We're going to double down on this. We're going to hire more fake DEA agents to tell you more lies. And that is a promise, damn it.
More smoke, more mirrors, more fake DEA agents.
And more drugs for everyone.
Well, instead of putting his money into something safer, Paul actually decides to put his money into much, much, much more dangerous business ventures.
Oh, God. What did he do?
Okay, before I get into this,
Oh God, I don't like it when the ominous future is met with a little bit more context. You know it's bad. You know he did something bad. When before we explain the bad thing he did, you say, "All right, before we get into that."
yeah. I want to try to outline for you a little bit his business structure and the way that Paul operates, okay? So
Okay.
maybe you feel like you can picture this a little better.
All
So,
right.
first of all, Paul is an extremely private person. Most of the people who work for Paul never meet him face to face. They'll receive whatever their instructions are via email or phone calls. Over the years, he creates multiple false identities for himself, some backed by false documentation, including a few passports he had with different identities. Those who did meet Paul said that he was a hefty middle-aged man, sometimes with dyed blonde hair, almost always wearing shorts and flip-flops.
Nice. It's like Elon Musk. And they're both from the African continent.
Listen.
Hold on.
Please don't compare this man to anyone else who's currently living until you find out all the things he did.
Oh God, you better get to it, Kurt.
Before we
you're
get
fanning
sued by Elon Musk.
You're fanning a flame underneath
I
my
know.
my butt right now. All right, please go on. Rip this
Okay.
Band-Aid, damn it.
So the way that his company is set up, he sets up a bunch of shell corporations in Manila, registered under the names of acquaintances or family members with no criminal record. All the money he makes from everything he does is laundered through Hong Kong. Mostly, it seems like by turning it into bars of gold or diamonds.
Nice.
He hires mercenaries or former soldiers through a chain of trusted people for all his ground operations, and he'll transport them around the world with private jets. He pays them $10,000 a week, kind of like a retainer. So
Oh my goodness.
they'll just get orders via email and, get on the plane to go wherever and go do whatever their orders are. All the legal and illegal aspects of the business are kept completely separate, and all of the various businesses that Paul ultimately gets involved with are kept separate. So no one knows the full picture except him. No one knows where the money comes from or where it's going. They only know what their own orders are.
Whoa.
So, to tell you the truth, Paul LaRue was involved in so many things that it's actually hard to track down the scale and all of the details of the things he was doing. I'm just going to give you some of the highlights of his business ventures over the next 10 years, okay?
Okay.
And I also want to mention that he had this habit of always considering new schemes. Some of them he would continue with, and some it seemed like he would just get bored with and forget about. In some ways, it seemed like maybe the whole thing was just something to occupy his time.
Hey,
But-
when you're at the top, Kurt, it's difficult to be entertained, right?
That's true.
I mean, look at me. Anyway.
Okay. Okay. On my episode 2, the one I'm hosting, Luis, you're going to make it about you?
Stop
Get
the
out of
podcast. Stop the podcast.
No, continue the podcast. We got to know about Paul LaRue.
Yeah, please. No, for the love of God, continue the podcast. You're giving me
Because we're
blue
here,
balls
Luis. We're here, and now you're killing time. We're at the big reveal, and you want to derail.
Sorry. I'm so sorry. Please go on.
Okay, the first thing that Paul gets involved with is smuggling black market gold out of various African countries.
Naturally.
Mostly Ghana and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The way he does this is he'll just send a mercenary to the country with essentially a bag of money and say, go find some gold to buy. And then when you have it, get back on the private jet and we'll fly you out.
Wow.
Sometimes this works. Sometimes, obviously, the person just gets robbed for, however many thousands of dollars they're carrying.
Mm-hmm.
But he ends up making a pretty large-scale operation out of that once he establishes some supply chains. At one point, he had some plans for some logging camps in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He hired a man to lobby the DRC government to allow Paul to set up logging operations. The government agreed, and Paul started building them, and then seems like he just kind of forgot about it and never came back to it.
Very nice.
In addition to his RX limited drugs, he starts smuggling some more illegal drugs.
Nice.
Cocaine out of Australia. Later, he smuggles it out of South America. He actually buys quite a bit of meth from North Korea.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, North Korean meth is made in government facilities, so they have complete access to all the chemicals. So the meth he buys is actually like 98% pure. He'll have someone get it from North Korea to China, and then he'll come in and come into China to pick it up. He builds meth labs in a few different countries. Several he was planning to build in Liberia near suppliers for the chemicals that they would need. And he seems like he probably built meth labs in a lot of other countries, but they just were never discovered. He has this whole era where he's got this business plan for Somalia. First, he wants to get into Somalian tuna fishing. Tuna fishing apparently actually pays quite a bit. But the problem in Somalia is that most tuna boats suffer from pirate attacks, so they don't end up making any money. But Paul thinks there's no real law enforcement in Somalia probably. I could just pay off all the pirates and then they'll leave my tuna boats alone. And if I'm going to do that, I may as well just make a base of operations. He did build his own village in Somalia to use as a base for arms dealing and drug dealing on a large scale. And he maintained a militia of about 200 men to protect the operation.
Jesus.
He eventually abandoned the venture, even with the 200 men in the village still there. Even though he abandoned it, this is the first time that Paul LaRue's name was mentioned in a UN Security Council report.
Oh, my God.
He purchased huge amounts of land in Zimbabwe that had been taken from white Rhodesian farmers. This was something that happened after the Rhodesian Bush War ended. He dealt a lot of arms, so guns, weapons, in Indonesia first, but later pretty much everywhere in the world. Notably, he was the broker for a large Iran arms deal. Between 2009 and 2012, LaRue helped broker and transport missile guidance systems to Iran, paid for in gold bars. He also manufactured weapons-grade chemicals to be sold to Iran a few different times. There were some rumors that he was planning a coup in Seychelles with a troop of international mercenaries.
What the hell?
He also had a plan to smuggle gold belonging to former Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi. And through all of this, there's just kind of a constant river of him putting out hits on people or sending mercenaries to intimidate people. He burned down a lot of rival logging companies. He eliminated any threats to his business. Finally, in 2011, he actually killed his own top hitman.
Oh, my God.
His top hitman's name was Dave Smith. Why this came about is because Dave Smith had kind of become a problem. First, he felt he wasn't being paid enough with his $10,000 a week, and he started skimming off gold bars and diamonds from the various places it was stashed around Manila. He also began skimming off the drug shipments. He had a pretty bad drug problem. LaRue always asked all his employees to keep a low profile because he just said, you know, we don't want to be out in the spotlight. We want to keep as quiet as possible.
Right.
Dave Smith didn't really listen. He owned a Lamborghini that he would cruise around Manila in. And he also bought a yacht that was allegedly larger than Paul's yacht, which, of course, is just so insulting if you're a James Bond villain.
I mean, damn, if for a man who was insulted that he didn't have a name at the beginning, you can just imagine what would happen if Dave gets a bigger yacht.
Dave of all people.
Yeah, Dave.
The thing
kind
is,
of name is Dave.
The thing is, Dave was Paul's top hitman, so he thought, who would Paul even contract to kill me? Because all the other people who work here, I got them hired.
Right.
I'm at the top of the food chain. But Paul actually had a plan in the event of this. He had a secret hitman that no one else in the rest of his company knew about, just in case this happened. So Paul and his secret hitman mercenary lure Dave Smith to a beach house where they both shoot him. Paul actually fires the killing shots, which is the first time he's ever personally participated in a murder he ordered.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Wait, quick. I'm so sorry.
Yes,
Side note. Imagine being like the top hitman for a man that's essentially running like a country. Like it's operating like a small country dealing in illegal activities. And you're this man's top, like essentially, if it was a real country, it's Secretary of Defense, right?
Right.
And your name is Dave.
And you're just Dave.
You're just
Smith,
Dave.
Dude.
This is Dave. Like, hey, yeah, I've got like 250 kills under my name. Who did it? And he shoots the victim, blows the smoke off the gun and says, tell them Dave sent you. You know? Anyway, sorry, that just, I couldn't help but mention that.
Nobody crosses Dave.
Oh, don't worry. Next time, tell them Dave's coming for you. Sorry. Continue, Kurt.
You know what? You say that, but have you ever seen John Wick? And his name is just John. Oh no.
Ooh.
John.
Here comes John.
Look out, John.
Better watch my back because I hear John's coming after me. Ridiculous. Get him a better name, like Megatron. I'm still on this
That's
boat.
true. That's true. If I was Russian mafia and I pissed off a guy named Megatron and he's coming after me, that's when I'm reaching for the mafia.
I'd end it myself. I'd help him.
So after he kills this Dave Smith, he gets increasingly aggressive and paranoid. He starts discussing with some various people in his organization plans to fake his own death should the need arise. He also started carrying a list of various people who had wronged him. It's kind of like a to-do hit list, but some of them were for very minor reasons. Like one of the people was this real estate agent named Catherine Lee, who LaRue believed owed him $1,000. LaRue ordered for Lee to be shot twice below each eye.
Oh, God.
This is where we get to Paul LaRue's downfall. So first, we have to go back a little bit to 2007. The DEA first learned about Paul LaRue when they subpoenaed a FedEx shipment from an online pharmacy. So the pharmacy was one of the pharmacies that RX Limited shipped to. But when they looked at the FedEx account, they saw that the same company was shipping to tons of pharmacies all across the country, which was kind of the first time anyone ever got a look at the scope of Paul's operation. So they had their eye on Paul since 2007, but there wasn't a lot they could do because the government of the Philippines wasn't really ready to cooperate. In 2012, Paul relocated a large portion of his operation to Brazil, and the Brazilian government was much, much more willing to cooperate with the DEA. So as soon as he relocated to Brazil, Paul's phone was wiretapped, it was tracked, all of his emails were intercepted, and suddenly the DEA is learning just all kinds of information about his evil empire out there.
My God.
So they started with one rogue online pharmacy company, and they got up to North Korean meth dealing.
Naturally.
The DEA gets some former disgruntled employees of LaRue who actually had tried to report him to the U.S. government before but had been kind of brushed aside. They get these employees to come and infiltrate LaRue's business and set up a fake face-to-face meeting with the Colombian cartel boss. Remember I told you that Paul is a very private person?
Yeah.
So they convince him to go to this meeting by kind of inflating the importance of the deal and that it would get a lot of respect for Paul, that it would really make him a serious player in South America. They kind of inflate his ego and convince him to go to this meeting where, of course, everyone involved is wearing a wire. And then Paul, all excited, goes to this meeting. He brags about killing Dave Smith. He brags about how pure his Korean meth is. He brags about how he had ordered 9 assassinations that year. And just kind of talks generally about everything going on in his world.
Bad move.
Of course, Paul. They arrest him the same day and extradite him to the U.S.
Of course.
He agrees to cooperate with the DEA as an informant before the plane even touches American soil. Which
Smart
is
move.
like pretty
Very
quick
good.
for a criminal mastermind.
Yeah, very good. Very good.
This is interesting. So the U.S. government uses Paul as a witness to lure his lower employees out of hiding and get indictments. Normally it works the opposite. When the DEA goes after an organization, they'll get kind of a low-level guy and threaten them with a prison sentence unless they want to flip. And then they'll just kind of work their way up the food chain, getting, this person's boss, then their boss, then their boss. But in this case, they got the top guy first, and then they used him to trick and arrest several of the other lower-level members in his organization.
They got the top guy, and they're like, well, damn. What do we do now?
Where do we go from here? So, yeah, his cooperation leads to the indictments of tons and tons of key figure from all parts of his empire. Paul eventually gets sentenced to 25 years in prison in June 2020, which doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, he did cooperate tons and tons, but 25 years is also not a lot for the number of people he's killed.
I guess technically, since he was just organizing the whole thing and not actually committing it. Plus, we remember like his friends in high places. I'm sure he still has those,
Yeah, I have a little bit of a theory that maybe sometime over the years, the U.S. government inadvertently worked with Paul or knew something about him. I mean, his thing was that anything that was expensive that could be bought or sold, he would be willing to distribute.
Right.
As part of me wonders if maybe at some point the CIA used him for some sort of backroom arms deal or something.
Yeah.
Maybe he knows a little too much. I don't know. That's just my little personal conspiracy theory, though.
But what happened anyway? So they get him.
Speaking of conspiracy theory, so he actually was sentenced in 2020. So he's currently in prison right now.
Yeah, recent.
But I do have, before we leave Paul LaRue, James Bond villain. I do have one final little interesting conspiracy theory.
Okay.
Do you know who Satoshi Nakamoto is?
I do not know.
Satoshi Nakamoto is the assumed pseudonym of the creator of Bitcoin.
Okay.
His true identity has never been identified. There's a lot of speculation about who he might be. As you can imagine, something the internet is pretty invested in. Paul LaRue is one of the pretty convincing candidates to be Satoshi Nakamoto.
Of course he's a crypto bro. Oh, of course.
So I'm going to give you the evidence here. The first big piece comes from some documents from this lawsuit called Kleiman v. Wright. Ira Kleiman filed a lawsuit against Craig Wright. Kleiman alleged that his deceased brother David had been business partners with Wright and the two had created Bitcoin. Kleiman felt his family was owed half of the 1.1 million Bitcoin Wright allegedly had. Satoshi Nakamoto, it is known that whoever it is has 1.1 million Bitcoin. So this person thought that their deceased brother had been partners in business with this other person who had created Bitcoin. Therefore, this still living person would have the 1.1 million Bitcoin. They were suing to have half of that since this person's brother had been 50% partnered, theoretically. Craig Wright filed for a protective order against some of the documents admitted into evidence. One footnote on one of the documents was accidentally left unredacted. The footnote is a link to Paul LaRue's Wikipedia page.
Whoa.
I know.
Okay. All right.
It is strange.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Remember the false passports I told you about before?
Yeah.
One of his false passports, LaRue's name is Salatchi Calder LaRue. Salatchi is pretty close to Satoshi.
Gotcha.
The mission statement of Bitcoin fits pretty well with Paul's ideas of encryption and protection from government surveillance.
Yeah.
Remember before when I talked about E4M, how he thought people needed a way to take power into their own hands and be hidden from governments, be able to keep their business private? Pretty similar to what
very
you
libertarian
hear a lot
of him.
Crypto bros saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, very libertarian. There's also an anonymous forum post 7 years before the creation of Bitcoin. It basically just talks about something that sounds a lot like Bitcoin, and people often attribute it to an early Satoshi Nakamoto post before Bitcoin was created. It just kind of says that this person has an idea for a decentralized digital coin currency that would prevent tracking or data collection from government or banks. The IP address originates in the Netherlands, and at that point in time, Paul was living in Rotterdam, Netherlands.
Oh, wow.
Satoshi Nakamoto's last post happened around the same time that Paul was arrested. So Satoshi Nakamoto would make some foreign posts. His last one comes a little bit before Paul got arrested.
Oh, that's incredible.
Okay,
oh, that's fascinating.
And last piece here. It's widely believed that Satoshi Nakamoto's 1.1 million Bitcoin, remember that, is protected and encrypted by TrueCrypt, the published software that was based on E4M. So, what do you think about that, Luis?
Well, first of all, this all started with a coder, a programmer. So, because like little Domino, join a year-long coding program. Big Domino, you're smuggling meth out of North Korea. Even bigger Domino, you invent crypto.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is with the timeline, the way it works, Paul would have actually, if he did create Bitcoin, he would have created it before he'd started expanding into the more legal actions, or kind of right at the beginning of that. Is right about the time, right in the beginning when I think he was just smuggling gold and cocaine, is when Bitcoin
just only gold and cocaine. Just those simple things.
Yeah. But it is interesting. Like I said, he laundered a lot of money. You can launder money through Bitcoin. It is interesting to think about. Did he create this perfect laundering system because he needed a way to pass millions and millions of dollars through a worldwide
he needed a way to launder just the amount of money he had, so he invented the way to launder it.
And it does seem believable that he's the person who would just go create it for himself, right?
Yeah, because he did the same. He created like the websites, right? You mentioned just so he could have several websites, he just made a place where you could get domains, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Essentially, long story short, you cannot trust computer science majors.
Yeah.
So that's it.
What do you think? James Bond villain or not?
Oh yeah, but
Big
like
Bond villain energy.
big Bond villain. But it throughout this whole thing, it almost seems like he's just fully remorseful. Like he's just like, yeah, I did it, like whatever.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what I like about him. Yeah, he may be a little evil. He might have done a lot of bad stuff, but like, he's not saying I didn't do it, right? I'm assuming he's not. I think that's what makes him the most like Bond villainy is just like, haha, yes, Mr. Bond, you caught me doing this, and I'm proudly killing a man out here. Of course I did. What kind of person would I be if I didn't launder all this money, right? Like,
yeah.
that's what I like. There's no pretense to this man.
You know, honestly, something about like being born in Rhodesia and your name is Paul LaRue is very Bond villainy to me.
Yeah, really. Yeah. It almost seems like a bad Hollywood writer just said, "Ah, shit, we've got this man named Paul LaRue. Where should he be born?" And someone just yells from across the room, "What about Zimbabwe?" You know?
Yeah.
Oh man. So wow, and that's the first story, Kurt.
That is the first story. That's
My
story
goodness,
#1.
you're starting off big. I like
I'm
it.
coming out swinging.
Little Anthony the Rue. Anthony the Road.
Why are you saying Anthony?
Well, it's Tony.
No,
Paul. Sorry.
If I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. Stop
the podcast.
the podcast.
Damn it. It's a little Pablo LaRue. Pablo the Road. Anyway,
Pablo
sorry.
the
Before I
Road.
keep making
True.
dumb jokes and forgetting people's names, please move on to the next story,
Yeah.
Kurt.
Okay. This is the story of
All about how.
I can't stand it here, dude. I hate it here.
Stop. For the
Whose
love of
idea
God,
was
stop
it
the
to do this
podcast.
Someone take the shot.
Dave, please.
So this is a story about a man who had a very interesting experience during the Klondike Gold Rush. He was
Ooh.
born in Mississippi in
Change of pace
1872.
entirely.
He was born in Mississippi in 1872. This man's name is Paul LaRue.
Oh no!
Father was John LaRue. He was a cotton farmer.
Stop.
Paul seems like he isn't particularly interested in farming. He's a little bit indecisive about what he wants to do with his life, but in 1896, gold is discovered in the Klondike region of the Yukon, leading to the Klondike Gold Rush, which was the migration of over 100,000 prospectors, both American and Canadian, to the Klondike in search of gold. Paul decides to go in 1898. No, I'm sorry, he arrives in 1898, so he probably left 1897, maybe early 1898. When he's age 26, he arrives in Dawson City in the Klondike region. He makes a partnership with a Canadian prospector named Robert Henderson, which was pretty common for American prospectors to do because, first of all, any partnership, then you can split the cost of your mining equipment, your supplies. If you have dogs in a sled, you can split the cost of that. And partnering with a Canadian prospector, it's someone who may know the territory a little better than you, may know the weather patterns a little better than you. There's different types of prospecting work. You can pan for gold, which you've probably seen in a movie at some point. There's also sifting mud from hillsides, so they'll actually make like a little slide almost and slide the mud down, and then there's a thing at the bottom that will sift the mud out of it, and you can see if there's gold flakes. You can also just dig for gold, which is what Robert and Paul did.
Okay.
Because it's so cold, you would actually have to thaw the permafrost of the ground with steam or fire, dig, and then sift through the soil that you pull up and hope that you get lucky, basically. Prospectors travel in groups on trails. They would make multi-day trips on a trail, then split off the trail to find spots to dig. In the year 1897, prospectors started traveling increasingly far north up the White Pass Trail. The reason for this is that locating gold deposits is a little bit like playing Battleship. You might dig in one spot and find a certain number of gold flakes, go a few feet farther north, find more gold flakes, and keep going until you find the gold deposit. Or if it goes down, then you start going back the other way. So you're kind of just checking the amount of gold flakes in different locations until you find where the source of it is. Normally that works, but the problem here is that the Yukon River runs through all these areas where there's a lot of gold, so it's taking gold flakes and spreading them out throughout the entire region.
Okay.
So there would be places that would have a lot of gold flakes, not because there was a gold vein nearby, but because the river just had a river deposit there where there was a corner or something that it was depositing gold flakes it had taken from somewhere else.
Okay.
So there was a lot of, as soon as someone has a tip that there's been gold found here, everybody is going to quickly rush and try to get there as soon as possible. In the year 1897, there was a rumor that north into the Yukon, there was a good chance of finding gold. In October 1897, Paul and Robert traveled north up the White Pass Trail for 4 days. Normally, prospectors wouldn't embark on a journey this long, so close to winter, but Paul and Robert are desperate. They've kind of just gotten this tip, and they haven't been very successful so far.
Some could say they're on a rush, Kurt.
They're on a... Roll credits.
Stop the podcast. Before we go on, Kurt, I'm still thinking his name is Paul LaRue. Like, you're not just pulling my leg here?
Yeah, they're both named Paul LaRue. It's not the same Paul LaRue.
No, I understand, but there's no. I'm still just shocked about that fact.
Do you recall this week how much I said I was going to try to mentally break you in this episode, Luis?
Yeah, no, I like there's.
See the mind games. See the web I have woven just to see you.
I feel like I've just woken up. I feel like I've just woken up from a nap, and I feel like I'm drunk, but I've done none of those things today. and it's
the room is spinning.
Yeah, the LaRue is spinning. Honestly, seriously. Sorry. Continue. I just needed to get it out there. I needed to get it off my chest that I'm freaking out over.
You were just sitting quietly with that for a while, just
yeah,
panicking.
and no one listening can hear me, but my mouth has been agape for like the entirety of this story so far. I'm like in shock. Go on.
Okay. So normally prospectors wouldn't embark on such a long journey so close to winter. But like I said, Paul and Robert are a little bit desperate because they haven't made very much money. They're hoping maybe they can really quickly get there before anyone else does, and they'll beat the winter storms. This hugely backfires. Winter storms that year were uncharacteristically early and uncharacteristically harsh. So Paul and Robert, along with many of the other prospectors who had been traveling with them, get caught in the snowstorm. Temperatures drop very quickly, being recorded as low as 7 degrees Fahrenheit. A lot of the prospectors decide to turn back and return to Dawson City. Robert knows the territory a little bit. He estimates that it would be faster probably to just continue north to get to the town of Clinton Creek than to try to turn back to Dawson City. So Paul, Robert, and a few other prospectors who also want to try the same thing continue north in the freezing conditions. Here's a little fun detail about Paul. Paul is kind of known as a bit of a complainer.
Damn it.
This is an excerpt from Robert Henderson's memoir, Robert's Gold Rush. Quote, "The cold stabbed through our parkas like a driven nail. It found its way through every fold and thread until it hit bone. If for a moment we closed our eyes to block the wind, our lashes froze together. Each man suffered equally but trudged along in silence, save for Paul LaRue, who spent his breath damning the cold and rambling about the warmth of his home in Mississippi." So everyone's here in these terrible conditions, suffering together, but trying to get through it, and Paul LaRue is just complaining and whining the whole time. After the first day that they're traveling in the snowstorm, LaRue is starting to look pretty rough, just very, very sickly, very gaunt. He's losing a lot of the color in his face. He makes a strange request of Robert Henderson. Quote, "LaRue asked what would be done if he were to die on the journey. I couldn't say," I replied. "I hadn't thought about the possibility." "Don't leave me in the snow," he said, sounding strangely fearful. "If the cold kills me, burn my body. My spirit won't rest in an icy grave." So,
oh, God.
Paul, pretty morbidly asked to be cremated if he's killed. Robert thinks this is a somewhat strange request, but with any luck, they should be at Clinton Creek in the next day. And worst case scenario, he could always just ignore Paul LaRue's wishes.
After all, he's going to be dead.
He's like, I could always just like toss him aside and just like keep going.
Who's going to tell on me? Paul? No.
Yeah. No, not Paul. No. The next morning, LaRue looks pretty bad. He's constantly shivering. Almost all the colors left his face. He can barely walk, so they abandon some of their mining equipment and tie him to the sled to be pulled by the dogs.
Oh, Jesus.
He sits on the sled the whole day and rambles incoherently about his home, the cold, his childhood, and by nightfall, Paul LaRue is dead.
Oh, no.
Robert leaves the body lashed to the sled. It's covered up with kind of canvas. They travel for another day. At this point, it's pretty slow going because the snow has gotten deep, which is really delaying them getting to Clinton Creek. During the day, Robert Henderson thinks about LaRue's request. Quote, "With the snow past our knees, I knew it may be another couple days before we reached Clinton Creek. We had neither the wood nor the strength to build a fire large enough to cremate a body, and yet I found myself unable to leave LaRue's corpse in that frozen tundra. I felt chained to the corpse. I had covered it up with a blanket, but with every bump of the sled, its weight reminded me of the promise I had made to a dying man."
Oh, God.
So he's kind of come face to face with it and realized he can't just throw LaRue's body away.
You know, I'm glad he's realizing that he made a promise to a dead man and he can't break that, and yet he still can't realize that he's terrible at estimating like time of arrival. Did he say like a couple days ago that John, just one more day until we get to Clinton Creek or whatever?
Yeah,
and
well,
then
that was
2 days
kind of
later.
optimistic.
We've got a couple more days. Oh shoot, sorry, Paul. we've got one more day, man. Sorry.
Paul's gonna be an ice cube by the time they get there, dude.
Yeah, really. Don't stick your tongue upon him. It's gonna get stuck.
For multiple reasons, I would say actually.
No,
Maybe not
reason-
lick a dead body. I don't know.
I don't know, Kurt. You and I are from different parts of the world, so maybe there's a cultural difference here.
No, but he's his initial estimate for travel time is kind of optimistic, but then when it snows more, then they're in knee deep snow, then it's delaying the journey a lot. So at this point, Robert Henderson knows what he's about. He thinks I don't really have the gumption to just throw his dead body off the sled. I also don't have any way to burn it, and it's kind of haunting me being here.
So road trip.
He's in a bit of a conundrum. A road trip.
We're gonna weekend at Bernie's, this man.
So that night, Henderson and the other prospectors camped near the bank of the Yukon River. Henderson discovers nearby, a little less than half a mile from where they're camped, the remains of the wreck of the HMS Defiance. So let me tell you why the HMS Defiance is there. The HMS Defiance was assigned to Captain Urbis Franklin in 1845 by the British Crown to look for an inland route from the Northwest Passage to the Pacific. So basically to explore to find a better shipping route potentially. It was stranded and left derelict on the Yukon River after being damaged by heavy storms and ice flows in northern Canada, and eventually it was deemed too much work to retrieve, so they just left it there. So Henderson has now stumbled upon the wreckage of it. This is 52 years later, so it's pretty broken down, but parts of it are still intact enough to have some semblance of a room. He gets some scraps of coal and some planks from the floor to start a fire in the cabin of the ship.
Nice.
And he drags LaRue's body into the cabin, throws some wood on top of it, and leaves. He watches the fire from afar for about an hour before he decides that he needs to go back and check to make sure the body is burned. Quote, "I needed to see that the body had burned so my burden could be lifted and I would be alone with the cold once more. When I opened the cabin door, I couldn't believe my eyes. There in the midst of the blaze sat Paul LaRue. The ice from his body had melted, creating a circle of dampened wood around him that would not burn. He turned and saw me aghast and gave a hacking, sickly cough. 'Shut the door,' he said. 'You'll let the cold in.'" So Paul LaRue is not dead.
Whoa. Oh, man. He was just taking part in cryonics.
Yeah, so that's the general theory. Obviously, this is pretty hard to diagnose because, it wasn't like as soon as they got to Clinton Creek, which I think was in the next day or two, he went, straight away and saw a doctor. I mean, maybe like a lower level doctor, but not someone who's going to diagnose how this man was
and an
dead
old priest and a
life.
young priest.
Yeah. Here's some possible theories that have developed after the fact.
Whoa.
So he definitely was near death, but it's possible that because of the cold and how weak he was, he could have gone into this sort of cold-induced coma, almost like a hibernation.
Oh.
And once he was in this sort of hibernation state, a day and a half of rest on the sled, he's just laying down all day and he's covered up. may have preserved his life.
Right. Wow.
And the harsh bumps of the sled may have helped to circulate his blood, keeping him a little bit warmer. Which is kind of funny to picture, just like his frozen body just bonking around on the sled.
Yeah, just the lack of
keeping this man
suspension in
alive.
the sled.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were no shock
Yeah.
absorbers, and that may have worked.
So the fire would have raised his body temperature high enough for him to come out of his coma, and the pain that he sustained from the few burns he got could have given a jump start to his system,
Whoa,
especially if it flooded it with a lot of adrenaline.
Wow.
So, yeah, basically, he was in a coma, kept insulated, kept his blood circulating, kept his blood pressure up, and then they heated his body temperature and gave him a shot of adrenaline, basically.
Just imagine the inside of his body, like his cells just feeling the burns and like feeling the heat come up and just kind of waking up and saying, "What the hell's going on? Where am I?"
Yeah, imagine just falling asleep on a sled and you wake up 2 days later in a burning old-timey ship.
Yeah. Also, I think we're not putting enough importance on the man that saw him, Like,
Yeah.
imagine your friend dies on the journey, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to leave him here. I'm gonna go take him. All right, we're gonna give him a proper burial. I'm gonna burn him. And I'm gonna go check on him, make sure it's okay, so that we can finally move on. You see him, and he's in there coughing, just vibing. I don't know, like drinking a bottle of rum he found, and that's terrifying.
Yeah,
Like-
as bad as this whole experience was for Paul LaRue, Robert Henderson is no doubt irreparably traumatized by this. His friend dies,
Yeah.
and then he sees him back to life.
Yeah. Fucking Paul LaRue said that his soul was not going to rest if it died in a frozen cave. This other man's soul is not going to rest regardless. Like, poor man. Yeah, this man's going to go back home and tell his family, "You're not going to believe the day I just had."
So, I was also thinking while reading some of his medical stuff that I feel like it's also possible Paul LaRue is just a major drama queen, especially given his reputation as a complainer. I mean, it's hypothetically possible that he was just like, man, this cold thing really sucks. And now I'm sitting on the sleigh because I'm real sickly. What if I just take a little nappy?
He was
And
pretending
He was pretending, and then his body starts getting burned because it's on fire, and he's like, "Oh, I'm awake now," which is why he'd be, of course, so jovial and calm when Robert Henderson comes back. He's like, "Oh, shut the door. It's getting cold in here." But I don't know. There's no evidence to support that. Short of a confession from Paul LaRue, who's now dead. I don't know how that would be proven.
I don't know. Paul LaRue is still alive. It's just not the same one.
He's with us in spirit. So, like I said before, the next couple of days they reach Clinton Creek. They take LaRue to the town doctor. He ends up losing several fingers and toes to frostbite. After the whole ordeal, he returns home to Mississippi, ends up living off kind of a combination of odd jobs and charity. He receives actually a few offers to write a memoir after the popularity of Robert Henderson's memoir, which of course has Paul's story in it. But he never did. It seemed more like he kind of just wanted to forget and move on from his time in the Yukon. So that is it today for our two Paul LaRues.
Oh, God, Kurt. First of all, I hate you for having two stories with two main characters called Paul LaRue. That's just throws me in a loop. But
that's Bond supervillain behavior.
Yeah, that is Bond supervillain behavior. Okay, speaking of, if you could just give me a quick summary of both stories, just so we remind both me and whoever's listening.
So we got a little, you've heard of Choose Your Own Adventure. Get ready for Choose Your Own Paul LaRue. We've got Paul LaRue, the born in Rhodesia, future James Bond supervillain who sold guns, meth, cocaine, gold, and logs in a worldwide dark web empire. And Paul LaRue, the gold prospector who went to the Yukon and had a very supernatural-esque near-death experience.
Ah, God, Kurt, this is a very difficult one for me to think, mostly for two reasons. First of all, the first Paul LaRue, Bond villain Paul LaRue, like that just seems like something that could be happening now, and I have not, shoot, if he got locked up last year or a couple of years ago, like that's something that could happen now. Yeah, like that's something very possible that I could see happening for anyone that wants to get that much power, right, and become their own small country with their small army. But on the other end, history has a knack of showing us that random shit just goes on always.
Yeah.
And so this Paul LaRue, combined with the other one, the one that was burned in the Yukon and
Right.
came back to life,
Right.
like that is just crazy enough. And it's so far away ago where there's not a lot of records, that could confirm and verify this.
What if I told you, Luis, that it's the same Paul LaRue? There is only one Paul LaRue.
Don't do this.
No, there's not.
Kurt.
There's not.
I'm already at my limit, Kurt.
I've done enough. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll let you.
Yeah,
I'll let you marinate in your decision.
Yeah, please don't throw. You're throwing water into an oil fire right now, and it's not what I need at this moment. Oh gosh, Kurt. Okay.
Wait, are we still in the phase where you're asking me questions, or are we
No,
getting close to decision time here? Because
listen. Okay, so the only records we have from the older Paul LaRue, the Prospector,
yeah,
is the story from his partner, right? The partner that essentially burned him, right? Or
that's
more tales?
That's most of the details. There's some historical accounts of just like identifying that he was born in Mississippi, he was in Dawson City, he was partnered with Robert Henderson, but most of the details come from Robert Henderson's memoir.
Okay. Yeah, and that's all the questions I have, Kurt. I'm thinking. I just have to think. So I think we got to our favorite time of the episode, which we both know is deliberation. Yes, sir. All right.
That was like we were both looking at each other there. I feel like waiting for the other one to say it first so we could join in. It was like, Are you gonna kiss me? Am I gonna kiss you? So much tension for this.
Yeah, there is
deliberation.
so much tension for being so
I'm
far
sorry.
away.
Go ahead. This is your moment. I've been talking all episode.
See. Here's the thing. I believe both stories very much. So I really am into both stories, in a huge way. But I feel like the first Paul LaRue, as believable as his story sounds to this day, you even mentioned that he was a very secretive guy and not a lot of details came out. And I because I don't want to look this up, I don't want to see if there's a lot of information that was given out by the government, but I feel like this should be a bigger story than what I know, right? And I don't know. I just love the idea of a prospector just accidentally lighting his friend on fire that was still alive. And I really want that to be the truth. So it pains me to say this, but I think that 1870s, 1880s Prospector LaRue is the real story.
Final answer?
I will lock in my answer, Kurt.
Luis, you fool. You insolent, naive, foolish boy. I've bested you finally.
No!
And it nearly killed me. Okay. The James Bond villain, real. Prospector, not real.
Wow.
Let me just quickly, little footnote here. The Prospector story is based on this poem called The Tale of Sam McGee, which is somehow like a big deal in Danner family lore. I don't know. My dad memorized it when he was a kid, and my uncle and my brother for some reason. Just
have you memorized it?
No, but I do know a lot of parts of it. I don't think I could run it off the top of my head.
Gotcha.
Okay, that aside, let's talk about Paul LaRue, James Bond villain.
Please.
You are so right that it is really hard to find information about him. That's why, I mean, like I told you before, the research for this episode almost killed me because I read the main biography of this man and the hunt for him.
This man filed a FOIA request just to get access to this episode's content.
Yeah, there's so many different things that he was involved in that nobody has the room in, one article or one place to put all of it.
And for such a long time.
Yeah, I had probably 20 different sources that I was combing through for this, including reading excerpts from the biography. There was a second biography that was just all about the DEA chase for him that I was listening to. and podcast. I listened to a whole like hour-long podcast about him. So it was so hard to accumulate all the information about this. It felt like climbing a mountain. But I was like, it's
so
gonna be all worth it when I shove it in Luis's face because he believed my stupid Prospector story.
Now, see, here's the thing. Like, with all this information that is available on him, I mean, sure, you're saying that you had to go search for it, but at the end of the day, you found it, right? Including like this hour-long podcast on this man. I'm surprised I've never heard of him before, which I think just goes to show.
It's pretty unbelievable, isn't it?
It just goes to show his ability to keep all of this under wraps, right?
Yeah. No, he really was like a real life James Bond villain, especially in just being so shadowy and operating behind the scenes. Even, because he was sentenced in 2020, but he was actually arrested in 2012. So since 2012, all the affairs that can become public about him have become public. And still, it's not very well known about.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I mean, hey, like I said, cannot trust computer science majors. Really. No, that's incredible. But yeah, that's so surprising that not a lot of information has come out of this man, to the point where I'm pretty sure most of the general populace would be like, who the hell is shit? I thought his name was Tony.
Yeah, it's true, you did.
And it's Paul. But wow, that's awesome. And wait, so hold on. So the other Tony LaRue story,
Paul,
you just made
Paul
LaRue story. The other one, you just made up the fact that his name was Paul also?
Yeah, well, I just had this because I quickly realized that the Paul LaRue James Bond villain story was going to be really, really long. And look, I'll be honest, Lisa, I'm getting tired of losing, okay? So I was like, I got to come up, we got to turn this into a mental game. I got to try to get some kind of advantage here. So the first thing I thought of was it would be clever if, since I have one really long story, that the second one's very short. Mm-hmm. And then I also thought it would be just distracting to have both characters named Paul LaRue.
No, Kurt, I was so on board with the first Paul LaRue. Literally so on board with him.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned that the other guys was also Paul LaRue, and you got in my brain.
Yeah,
man.
I just wanted to make you question everything. I thought I'm going to, I had like 10 pages of notes for Paul LaRue James Bond villain, and I was like, I'm going to build this whole story with this whole character, and then let me shatter it by reminding Luis that I'm lying to him at some points, and he doesn't know when.
And that's what this podcast is about, Kurt.
And that's what it's all about. This, really, I'm super excited about getting this, but it's like really more of a moral victory because now we're at what, 5-2?
No. We are the tally. If I'm reading correctly, Kurt, we are 4-2.
4-2. Okay, well,
so
I'm slowly climbing back.
4-2. Me. So I'm currently still ahead.
Yeah.
But listen, Kurt, if there's a story for me to lose to, this is incredible.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I'm glad because
good.
there's not going to be any more of me doing this amount of research, okay? I'll just die. I need to sleep at some point.
Yeah, you felt your honor besmirched a little bit, and you had to at least have a bit of a comeback. I like it.
It got personal. I'm not going to lie, Luis.
It's okay, Kurt. It typically does. Between you and me.
I had like your picture on a dartboard that I was throwing darts at while I'm thinking about all the cool stories I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. Me too. I mean, come on, Kurt.
Okay. Well, little by little, I am climbing back. Everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed the stories. Also, Luis and I want to give a thank you to all the people who have reached out to us with good feedback. I don't know about Luis, but I think I only expected to ever have like 3, maybe 4 people listen to my podcast. So
that's true.
It's been really nice for all the people texting us and talking to us, telling us that they had a good time and they enjoyed listening to the podcast.
And there's been even some people that have reached out with suggestions for possible stories in the future. So if you know us and want to send us something that you would like us to lie to one another about, please do so, or send it to us on our Instagram, which we are at unbelievablepod, and send us a DM. We will answer it because we have nothing better to do.
That's true. Yeah, Luis nailed it. Instagram, unbelievablepod. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you for listening, everyone, and see you next time.
See ya.